We're going to continue with Unit 5. And Unit 5 is about identify and evaluate the challenges of assessment implementation. Okay, we will continue with our lesson. So today we will look at what are we looking at? Teacher's own assessment plan. So what we have been covering for the most part is what do we say? For the most part, what we've covered is assessment in general. But then this time around, we are looking at assessment for the teachers themselves. So within your classroom, you also need to have an assessment plan. And then the first one is indicate the purpose of the different elements in the assessment. Just hold on 1 second. I need to. All right. So, okay. Number one, what do we have? Indicate the purpose of the different elements in your in the plan. So here we're talking about, for example, every assessment type that you're going to use, methods or measure that you're going to use, it should have a purpose, and then you should indicate that. And then they always suggest that you should use multiple assessments rather than just one type of assessment to have a better picture of what the learners can do. And number two is decide on the frequency of the assessment. Decide on when, how often are you going to carry out your assessment, right? How often are you going to carry out your assessment? So that is now, excuse me for the interruption there. I'm so sorry about that. Okay. And then when it comes to number two, you decide on the frequency of the assessment. How often are you going to do the assessment? And then here they say that you should have an overview of like the whole semester, for example, like what assessments are you going to do, like how often are you going to do them. Not so much of a schedule, but the frequency of the assessment that you're going to do. Are they going to be just activities that you're not going to really record the marks of the students, but rather some type of formative assessment that does not really require you to record them? And then you should also have the type of assessment that obviously you're going to record. All right. Don't just focus on the on the activities that are formative and then neglecting the assessment from which you record the results. All right. So here that's what they suggest. And then they also suggested that you should have this type of assessment, the assessment from which you get the results should be periodic, so that they know maybe after 3 weeks or after a number of units you assess them. Then obviously that way they'll be on task. All right, they will study, because I know even for you guys it's the same situation, in a sense that you do not study if you know that you don't have a test. You only study when you have a test. All right. It's the same with the learners. If they know that they're not going to be penalized, or there's no consequences on the results that they get, then obviously they will not pay attention so much on what you are teaching them. So have type of activities that also keep them on their toes, knowing that they will be assessed, so that they get serious with what you are teaching them. And then number three, consider the schedule for the assessment. So the scheduling of the assessment should not be coincide with the external examination, or be directly after the holiday. All right. So here they are suggesting that don't give the students assessment like around the same time as the examination, and nor should you give your learners an assessment right after an examination. The assessment should be done, at least you should give them enough time to study, because during the after the holiday, during the holiday, not all the learners go live in environments where they get a chance to study. No, they don't. All right. So to give them equal opportunities, give them a few weeks or a week after the holiday, and then you give them an assessment. All right, so that's just an example. Seek out appropriate dates for giving them assessment. So that's what it means. And then moving on to number 4, which is plan for the right types of assessment. And that means now objective assessment. So we know that we have got objective assessment, and then we have got performance-based assessment. Objective assessments are the ones that are regarded as the traditional assessments. Which have got now objective items such as true or false, multiple choice, and matching. So those are the traditional objective type of assessment. You should have those as well as the performance assessment, all right, whereby they carry out projects, compile portfolios, writing essays. Those are what they call performance assessment. So you should have a number of them, all right, different type of assessment. Don't just have one type, so mix them up. And then number 5, plan to revise your assessment periodically. So what does that mean? Don't use the same question paper over and over. What will happen if you always use the same type of question papers? What will happen? Yes, anyone? You can type, or you can unmute yourself, raise your hand and unmute yourself. So what will happen if you use the same, like similar examination? Recycle question papers, basically. What will happen? And there's no right or wrong answers. Just try. You never know. Maybe your answer is correct, or you bring up a point that we've never thought of. We are always learning from each other. So, what do you think?
Ma'am, I think learners will not really study. They will just revise the question papers. And if that happens, then the result will not be reliable in some cases.
That's true. Thank you so much, Priscilla. That's very true. Okay. So they will never really concentrate on what you teach them. Even if you update your notes, they will not concentrate on that, but rather concentrate on the question papers. And yes, they will memorize all question papers and never study new work. That's true. That's what we just mentioned. Thank you very much, Kabetuna. Because they already know what to expect exactly. And then also, this may lead to cheating. I mean, for them, memorizing already in itself does not really show what they are able to do and what they know, but rather what they have memorized does not show their skills. And also, they can come into the examination with a past question paper, and then they can copy. So cheating is possible in these cases, right? So what they suggest is you need to revise your assessment. Don't just use the same questions over and over. Change them up. Do you understand? Reword them. Their answer options also change them up, like reword them in some ways. Do you understand? Don't just use the same one. And then create new items, new test items, or new assessment type that is involving, let's say, if you now have taught them new content, then include that content within your questions, and probably the type of questions now that you have, the type of questions that you'll be having, they will not be the same as the ones that you have, they have already covered or previous learners have covered. And then moving on, what do we have? So we did number 5. Now we are at number 6. Number 6 suggests that decide about the use of textbook-based assessment. We do know that certain textbooks do have some sort of test, all right? At the back of the textbooks, there are some test items, but remember that certain parents, let's say you buy a let's say you buy a home economics textbook for teachers, and then that textbook has got test questions, and then instead of just using those test questions as they are, you shouldn't do that. You should mix it up. You should change them up, because certain parents are wise enough to buy their children the teacher's textbook as well, because that those textbooks contain more information than the learner's information. Do you understand? So you should avoid just using textbook-based assessment as they are. All right. You disadvantage learners who cannot afford the textbook, the teacher textbook that certain parents can afford. All right. Does that make sense? Do you have questions regarding that? Any questions? So the silence, I'm assuming that means there are no questions. All right. So for your assessment, always change them up to fit your own learning environment. So that means that you must change up, adapt assessments for your learners. Don't just use them as they are. Okay. And then they should also be related to the objectives that you have. All right. The purpose of why are you assessing them? There should be certain objectives that you want to evaluate to see how the learners are doing and where they are regarding those objectives, and then your assessment should be based on those objectives. Right? If you're not having any questions, we are moving on to the next part, the implementation. So we are going to talk about the implementation plan. We have got 4 minutes. I think we are just going to start with an introduction of the implementation plan, but we're not going to go into details with it because we will end at, or maybe we can just finish. Yeah, I think we're just going to finish the implementation plan. All right. So when it comes to the implementation plan, it provides an ongoing map for assessing components of the program over time. So the implementation plan it gives you that a bigger picture of the assessment that will be ongoing that year or that semester if you have divided them into semester. All right, and then the implementation plan includes an action plan to achieve a program maintenance outcome, because we always have maintenance outcomes, which are the study anticipated learners profile over the next 6 years. Well, we don't really say 6 years anymore. We say something like 5 years. All right, but I don't know. Maybe it depends on or what school it is. And I think too, now with the new curriculum, things have changed a little bit more. The length of the assessment plan might change depending on which grades do we have within a school. So if we have grade 8 up to grade 12, those are grade, okay, we've got grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. That would be like 5 years, for instance. All right. That is the assessment outcome, maintenance outcome. And then we also have to look at the program learning outcomes. Seeing, for example, what kind of skills have the learners attained during their year at your school. All right. Now we are going to look at the table that we're going to see in a short while, which will include what the plan includes, and also the guiding criteria and suggestions that you have to consider when you are looking at these steps that we have in the plan. So we have got in the plan, implementation plan, we should have program mission or goals, program learning outcomes, or what we call objectives, because in the syllabus we have got objectives, we don't have outcomes. And then we have got program maintenance outcomes. We'll also look at what that means. Assessment method, methods or activities, and then alignment, and then assessment process. Right? So those are some of the aspects that you have to include in the implementation plan. Let's look at them now in details. So we have got the first one that we have is the program mission or goals. So the guiding criteria suggests that you must include the mission and mission or program goals. So that is now program, mission, and program goals that describe what the learners in the subject will know, value, and will be able to do upon their graduation. All right. So you have to mention this. What do you really expect them to know, and what do they need to show that they are able to do? What should they value? And all this information should be included. And then we get that information, so you don't have to come up with it yourself, but you should refer to the Ministry of Education mission statement. All that information, like the one that is suggested by the Ministry of Education, you find that in the syllabus at the very beginning. Like the mission and goals are always stated at the beginning of the syllabus. All right. And then moving on, we have got program learning outcomes, and also known as objectives. For us in the syllabus, we don't have outcomes per se. All right. Okay, let me not assume that all the syllabus say they do not have learning outcomes, but for the ones that I have seen, they do not have outcomes, but rather they have got objectives and competencies. All right. So you need to state those. List the program learning objectives / outcomes. And then these are stated in the syllabus. All right. And then next, program maintenance outcome. This is the list. Program maintenance outcome. This is the list. Okay. They suggest that you list the program maintenance outcome recommended as a result of the academic review. So maintenance outcome. So these are all, okay, as suggested here. Program maintenance outcomes generally include items that are not directly related to the assessment of the learner's learning objectives, such as, but rather program maintenance outcome, we are looking at reviewing the laboratory space. Is it really up to standard? Does it have everything that a laboratory in the 21st century should be? All right. Hiring additional support staff. If you see that you do not have enough teachers, for example, or you do not have enough computer lab technicians, then maybe hiring extra support. Do you understand? Those are the maintenance that they are talking about, not so much of the outcomes in terms of the objectives of what the learners should know and what they should be able to do. And then next we have got the assessment methods / activities. Describe the assessment methods to be used and appropriate for the learning outcomes. So you know what your learning objectives are, and then you have to think about then what type of assessments should I use to help me really see if this objective that I have listed have been attained. Do we need to use tests? All right, objective test, or do we need to use performance assessment, whereby they need to carry out projects, they need to do research, experiments, presentation? What kind of assessment will best suit the learning outcomes that you have stated? All right. So programs should employ multiple measures for assessing objectives. So each objective should be aligned with at least one direct assessment method. All right. So you have decided which learning outcome am I going, or learning objective rather, am I looking at? And then for each, because they say list the learning objectives, right? They've mentioned that you must list all of them. And then let's say you have listed 15, or let's just say 5 learning objectives. So for each learning objective should have its own type of assessment that really is directed to that specific learning objective. All right, rather than just saying, I'm just going to use one test that will cover all the learning objectives. That might leave out certain objectives, but rather, suggest that you, it's possible to have one test, but it's going to be a very long test if you're going to test all the learning objectives that you have listed within one test. It's going to be a long one, and that might not be practical because it will affect the learner's performance. If a test is really long, certain learners might not be able to focus, to really show what they are capable of doing. All right, so that's just a suggestion. And then moving on, alignment. So indicate where and at what level program learning outcomes are being addressed in the curriculum. And this can be accomplished through the use of curriculum map. All right. So here, what do you need to do? First of all, you need to create a curriculum map. And in the department, and that this map can be created either within a department or it can be created during a committee meeting. So deciding coming up with a committee of a number of teachers or whoever to come up with a curriculum map. So what is a curriculum map in details? So how do you describe a curriculum map? A curriculum map is a visual layout of a subject's educational standards, so specification grid, like really stating out the educational standards for that specific subject. And it also includes the resources that the teacher will need to use to address those standards, all right? The standards or the objectives rather, okay, that are going to be covered within the lesson. So that's what we mean by curriculum map. So you have to create that and then you address it. And then, so that is, I think this is our last one, right? Is it the last one? Yes. The last one is assessment process. So identify when each objective will be addressed. Because not all objectives will be addressed within one assessment. So you have to indicate then when will a certain objective will be addressed. You have to identify that, and then identify program heads of the department who is best equipped to take a leading role in the assessment of each. So we are going back to a curriculum map. What you want is to know what a curriculum map is. All right. So what is a curriculum map? A curriculum map is a visual layout of a specific subject's standards. All right. So for each subject, it has its own standards, and then these are found in, I don't know what specific document from the Ministry of Education that you'll find like the specific standards of the subject, but I think the syllabus also does that. All right. And then for us, specifically for us, our standards are very much related to the objectives that we also have in the syllabus. All right, stating that, and then the standards that each subject has. All right, and also it includes the curriculum map also includes the type of resources that you are going to use within a certain subject. All right. And then this is what we really do get from the syllabus. If I am to think about let's say teaching the English syllabus, it has those standards of like how do they standards. You can find them, let's say, when they are going to assess the learners under the reading skills. What kind of standards will they be expecting for a learner, for instance, to get an A or a B or a C or whatever symbol? And then they explain in details of what they are expected to show that they are able to do. Okay. And then they have under the reading skills, they mention the different expectation assessment objectives, for example. And then under the writing, they have assessment objectives. And then under speaking, assessment objectives. Under listening, they have assessment objectives. All this are included in the... Who wrote down the definition? Okay, fine. I'll include the definition. I'll make a point. I'll make a note. I'll make a note to include the definition for curriculum map, because maybe I'm just rambling and you're not getting what it means, because you need a specific definition. All right. So it includes now the resources that you need to use for you to accomplish these standards. All right. Okay, so I'll make sure that I include that when I give you the notes. Does that work, Emilia and August Haononge? Okay, and now we'll move on to the last one, which is assessment process. Identify when each objective will be addressed. Identify the program HODs who is best equipped to lead the role in the assessment of each subject. We do know that not all the it's not always the HODs who take the lead on the assessment of each subject. What do they have? So who is that person who is in charge of a subject? Do you know? Have you come across this term? I bet you did. So in schools, we don't only rely on HODs, but rather on subject heads. We have subject heads. We have HODs, and then under HODs we have got subject heads, and then under the subject heads we have got now the ordinary teachers. All right. So we have principal, HODs, subject heads, and then ordinary teachers. So the subject heads are also the ones assigned to take the leading role when it comes to the assessment, because they are the ones who also take care of the subject file where you have all different kinds of information that you have relating to that specific subject. Okay? And a good tip is to first assess an outcome where data are already available, and then a program can assess all outcomes a year, but planning must occur to cover all the outcomes. So whoever is gonna do, let's say, the assessment for one specific, just the overall performance of a subject, that could be the HOD, maybe. But then imagine now an HOD with a number of subjects under his or her department. That's gonna be so much work for one person. So subject heads do play a role in this part assessment process, like who is going to lead all the teachers who are going to participate in assessing the outcomes, or what we call objectives of a specific subject. All right, do you have questions? And then here now, when you're looking at the program outcomes, then you don't only use the new information that you're going to get from the assessment that you have done within that year. You could always use the data that have been used, let's say from last year, and then compare them with the data that you are getting during that year. I think that's mentioning here as well. Do you have questions? Any questions? Yes or no? Yes, Rosaria?
Was a mistake, ma'am.
Oh, okay. No worries. All right. If we don't have any questions, I think we're going to end there, because that's the end of the implementation plan. Tomorrow is Tuesday. Tomorrow you don't have class, do we? We don't have class tomorrow, right? And then in the next class, we are going now to begin with the challenges, assessment. Challenges that comes with assessment implementation. Yes. Yes, Ndidi.
When are you suggesting maybe the test will be on?
When? I mean, dearest, we are only finishing. I mean, we are only finishing maybe Unit 5 this week, and we need to cover Unit 6 as well. After Unit 6, that's when you take the next test. So the probable time will be end of next week. Then you'll have your second assessment.
All right.
Okay. Any other questions? If there are no other, which data is Miss referring to? Which data? The data such as the ones on the data such as, okay, let me just verify one thing quickly. The data that we are talking about here, so we have got, okay, hold on, program learning outcomes. And here we are talking about, okay, here we are not really specifying, we are saying all the outcomes, program outcomes. These outcomes could be learning outcomes, learning objectives, the ones that are more specific on what the learners know and what they can do, all right? So we can have data on their performance on the tests and all other types of assessment, performance based assessment. And then we have got now other outcomes. Outcomes could be on things like, what do you need to improve within the program? Do you need to vamp up your laboratory, for example? Do you need to hire extra staff to help out in the laboratory? Do you need extra teaching staff? Do you understand all that kind of information? What do you need to change do you need to keep teaching the same way? Okay, for example, do you need to like how you set up your program? Do you need to teach it the very same way that you have taught it the previous year, or do you need to swap certain certain, like the schedule of how you teach? For example, if you have experiments, maybe you start first with teaching them content and then you do experiments. Or do you need to swap it up whereby you teach content first and then experiments after? Do you understand? Stuff like that. Because when you are testing the learners, when you are assessing them, the results, the data that you get from that, with the data that you have to get from that you get from those results of the learners should inform you on certain things that you need to change up. All right. You need to change the way the teaching methods, for example, that are being used mostly by the teachers. Do they need to be trained? Do you understand? Do they need to be trained on the newer methods of teaching that might work best with the type of learners that you have within your school? Do you understand? All these data now that you have will, the data that you have collected from all these different aspects, either learning outcomes or specifically program outcomes, are the ones that we are talking about here as data. Does that answer your question, Emilia? Any other questions? If we have no other questions, that will be the end of our lesson. In the next lesson, we are going to start with this topic. All right? Thank you so much for coming. Starting from next week, that's when we are going to have our double. See you on Wednesday at 14:30. Thank you so much for coming. Goodbye.
You are now muted.
Okay, goodbye, everyone.
You are now unmuted.
All right, I'm going to exit the lesson here. Yeah?